In this video, we're going to talk about the law of supply. So the law of supply states that if there's an increase in the price of a good or service, there's going to be a corresponding increase in the quantity of that good or service that is supplied. And conversely, if the price goes down, if there's a decrease in the price, then there's going to be a corresponding decrease in the quantity supplied. So let's think about ice cream. So as the price of ice cream goes up, as it rises, ice cream suppliers are going to be willing to supply more ice cream. But if the price of ice cream were to go down, if it were to fall, then ice cream suppliers would be willing to supply less and less of it as the price goes down. And we're holding everything else constant, all else equal, ceteris paribus. We're just looking at what happens to the quantity supplied when there's a change in the price of the good or service. So it's similar assumption to the law of demand, only it's working in the opposite way. Because if you remember from the law of demand, we said that if there's an increase in the price of a good, then the consumers are going to demand less of it, right? But with suppliers, it works in the opposite way. If there's an increase in the price, suppliers are willing to supply more of the good or service. So let's think about the market for chocolate bars, and we can put together something called a supply schedule where we look at different prices and we say, okay, at this price, what would be the quantity that producers would be willing to supply? So when we're talking about quantity, we're talking about quantity supplied. So at a price of $1 or €1, let's say that chocolate bar producers wouldn't produce any chocolate bars at all. They say, hey, we're not going to produce any, so the quantity would be 0. But if the price were to go up to $2, then they say, you know what, we would supply 3 chocolate bars at that price. If the price is at $3, then they'd be willing to supply 6 chocolate bars. And so we see that as the price goes higher and higher, and ultimately gets up to $5, the quantity supplied goes higher and higher. So at a price of $5, they're willing to supply 12 chocolate bars, where if the price were only $1, they won't supply any chocolate bars at all. And so that reflects our law of supply. We say that as the price is increasing of the chocolate bars, the quantity that producers are willing to supply, that's also increasing as well. So we've got an increase in the price that leads to an increase in the quantity supplied. And now what we can do is we can create a graph. And we can, with this graph, we can create a supply curve where we plot out all the points for our supply schedule, and we can see how it looks graphically. So let's take the price of $1. So at $1, and we always have price on our y-axis and quantity on the x-axis, and in this case, remember, quantity is quantity supplied. At a price of $1, the producers are willing to supply 0 chocolate bars. So that's 0, it's right here at the origin. Now, at a price of $2, they're willing to supply 3 chocolate bars. At a price of $6, at a price of $3, they're willing to supply 6 chocolate bars. And at a price of $4, they're willing to supply 9 chocolate bars. And then if the price goes up to $5, they're willing to supply 12 chocolate bars. So now what we can do is we can draw a line through the graph. Now, in the real world, the supply curve is not always going to be a straight line, right? But here in this case it is. And so what this is reflecting is the fact that this curve is going up, it's sloping upward. That is telling us that we've got the law of supply in action, right? As the price is going up, as it gets higher and higher, then the quantity demanded, the quantity supplied is also going higher and higher. So we have an upward sloping supply curve. And so we would label this S, or we could label it S1 or something like that. Now, we can have things that happen that change something other than price. For example, if there were to be a change that made it a lot cheaper to manufacture chocolate bars. For example, if labor became cheaper or something, some input, some factor of production for producing chocolate bars became cheaper, we could actually have a shift. We could have a shift where the supply curve shifts to the right. It shifts to the right, and so then we would have S2. Or conversely, it could also have something happen. Let's say a factor of production becomes more expensive. We could have a shift to the left. And so we'll talk about these shifts and the things that can cause a shift in supply in the videos to come.